everyone, it's Dr. Jensen, and we are down to our last personality type, last dimension in Module 1, Part 4. We are into the judger or perceiver. So I'm going to go back to the list from your textbook that gets into judging or perceiving. And again, this kind of helps you orient yourself on one side or the other. Now, by way of caution, we need to make sure that we get past stereotypes or assumptions or speculation about what this means about your kindness, how you feel about argument or peace or anarchy. I mean, it gets into this kind of territory, which can be in some ways a little disturbing for people to wander into. So in any case, just realize that both sides of this one are actually quite extreme and are not necessarily the most healthy way to live. So they each have their own pitfalls, and most people actually operate with some elements of both. But you will be more on one side versus another. So this one is going to be a little more evenly split for many of you, and don't let that derail you in determining your type. It's actually quite normal. So judging or perceiving, let's start on the judging side. Judging, people who are judgers are happiest after decisions have been made. Again, this promotes peace and stability, and that's something they value and prefer. They have a work ethic. They work first and they play later if there's time. So they're kind of workhorse, not racehorse style people. They set goals and work toward achieving them on time. They prefer knowing what they're getting themselves into. They are product oriented. Emphasis is on completing the task, and so they're interested in results. And if they're competitive in sport or music or dance or any kind of activity like that, they like trophies. They like to celebrate their accomplishments because it drives them. They derive satisfaction from finishing projects and getting results, as I said, and they see time as a finite resource and take deadlines really seriously. And they kind of are quite good at maximizing their potential and their productivity, so they can be a really powerful worker in your environment. Over on the perceiving side, the perceivers are happiest leaving their options open. They aren't very good decision makers. In fact, they're pretty ambivalent most of the time. They just don't really care for a lot of structure. They have a play ethic. Enjoy now, finish the job later if there's time. So they tend to seek play first, and sometimes have trouble motivating, getting after tasks and getting the job done. They're kind of master procrastinators, so you have to work with them. They change goals as new information becomes available. So they can meet their goals, but sometimes, things change for them. And that's fine because it keeps things interesting and they really crave that variety. They like adapting to new situations. And so these people are most important when it comes to change management. If you have major changes happening in your organization as an employee, if you put a perceiver on the team, they're going to be very, very helpful in kind of providing that emotional calm, because the change doesn't bother them. In fact, they find it exciting. So this is someone that looks forward to it, and sometimes that's just the energy you need. They are process oriented, emphasis on how the task is completed. So they find excitement out of the journey rather than the destination. Okay. They may not have as many trophies on their shelf, but they would probably save all the photos and experiences and maps and plans and all the pieces that contributed to their participation. They would be the person that saved all that. They derive satisfaction from starting projects, so it kind of gives them a breath of fresh air. Again, that variety. So they're good starters, but they're not necessarily good finishers. They see time as a renewable resource and see deadlines as elastic. And so some people really enjoy perceivers because they kind of, get a lot out of life. and use their time to really enjoy things, but they're not necessarily good at meeting deadlines. And that can be a problem for them. But again, where you get structure, you may lack flexibility, and flexibility can be important, but not at the expense of structure. So you can see how these ones kind of play at each other a little bit. Let's dive into the text a little more deeply, where we get into judgers or perceivers. So this personality dimension gets into our preference for structure or making decisions, or for spontaneity, taking in information. So again, an important distinction between judgers and perceivers is really the issue of closure, how much they crave or despise closure as a form of peace or oppression. Okay, closure is really central for them. So let's go further. And again, keep in mind, everyone uses both judging and perceiving in daily life. And again, as with the other personality dimensions, no one behaves strictly one way or the other. And it's really good to seek a balance of judging and perceiving. And we'll get more into that shortly. But judgers tend to live in an orderly world. Sorry, I missed that. In an orderly world, and are happiest when their lives are structured and matters are settled. See, so what I just did is a good example of something that would bug a judger. The fact that the professor typed right into a PowerPoint and it wasn't finished would completely bother a judger, right? I did that on purpose. I can say I did that on purpose, but I didn't. I'm a perceiver. So again, kind of an accidental example. They love structure and they love matters that are settled. That's not to say that perceivers don't like structure. Structure is very important, but not the most important thing to them. So judgers are good at stability, really good at stability. They have a judging attitude and like to make decisions, regulate life, and keep their lives under control. Now, this is where judgers get a bad rap. People brand them as control freaks. They are not. They like order. They are very organized. And people like that can get a lot done and provide a lot of the continuity that we need to keep life going. So I don't want them to get branded that way. Perceivers tend to live in a spontaneous way and are happiest when their lives are flexible. So they really get a lot out of spontaneity, right? Where they kind of fly by the seat of their pants, which really bothers some people, but perceivers just flourish in that situation. Perceivers have a perceiving attitude, meaning they're staying open to all possibilities, seeking to understand life rather than control it. So they feel that if they control it too much, they aren't letting life deliver the kind of information that they enjoy and they think is important. So that's why they kind of rebel a little bit. So perceivers kind of get the bad rap of being rebellious or being anarchists, I guess, to an extreme, and nothing could be further from the truth. They do very much value structure, but again, not at the expense of other things. So I don't want them to get a bad rap either. It's easy to kind of operate in those terms. And let's get into judgers. Judgers are not judgmental, cruel, or opinionated. They just prefer to have issues resolved and seek stability and peace. They often struggle with change and adaptation and generally do not enjoy surprises. So you would not want to give a judger a surprise party. They wouldn't really like that. They experience tension until closure on an issue is reached and are constantly drawn toward making a decision. Because again, that's going to give them the stability they crave. If they are allowed to go extreme in this dimension, they run the risk of becoming rigid, dogmatic, and inflexible. And nobody wants that because that actually creates other problems for you in life. Judgers are driven by deadlines and punctuality, and they prefer a planned and orderly world living in a structure with a definite beginning, middle, and end. So judgers, as students, tend to do relatively well in a semester format because there's a definite beginning, middle, and end. And they also are the kind of people that like planning out their entire semester from beginning to end. They have a lot of organization, and judgers in this class really may not like how this class is being built as we go, because they kind of don't have as much certainty and stability that they normally operate within. So this would bother a judger. Okay. They enjoy being in charge of what is happening to themselves and enjoy making decisions, tending to see things in plain and simple terms and like to come down on one side or the other of an issue. They're very resolute. So, for example, someone who's a judger would be more drawn to more absolute terms of seeing the world, right? So things in black and white. They might be tempted to do some of the branding and the stereotypes because it helps them conceptualize and box up their thoughts, and again pushes them to that decision that they crave of how to organize their thoughts or approach to something, and they just want to move on to the next thing. They don't want to have to spend a lot of time on it. So, for example, there was a story in the book about a couple that was shopping for new bikes. And one member of the couple just basically went up to the salesperson and said, "Which bike do you recommend?" And the salesperson showed her the top selling bike, and she said, "Yep, that's fine. I'll take it. That sounds good." Because for her, it led to a decision, and she knows that the salesperson is going to know everything there is to know, and she can trust that and just move on and know she has the very best. Versus the other member of the couple found the same salesperson and asked them hundreds of questions and was really ambiguous in the decision making and very troubled by different elements, the return policy, because that seemed rigid. And then they said, "No, I just don't think I can make a decision." And they are information gathering. I got to look at 10 more bikes. So when you think about how you make purchases, of course, we all like to make sure we're buying the right thing, but it's the extent to which you go to how much research you do. Someone that's a judger can be satisfied with the facts and organize things into, I should buy it, I should not, or yep, it's here, no, it's not. A preceptor is going to have trouble buying things. They are the shopper that you may not enjoy being with because it takes them forever to make a decision, and it's like they just can't get past some of the details, and they want maximum flexibility, and it's almost obnoxious. Let's get into perceivers. Perceivers are not necessarily perceptive, so that's a stereotype about them, thinking, oh, they're so detail-oriented, so astute about seeing things accurately. They may miss the details, so it doesn't necessarily mean they're detail-oriented. They just simply like perceiving possibilities. So it's more that they like receiving a lot of information and having information gathering is how they operate. Perceivers experience tension when they're forced to make a decision because, again, they kind of buck at that. They don't like to be coerced. They don't like to be asked to do things and having people come down on them. They avoid closure and they prefer to keep their options open. If allowed to go extreme in this dimension as a perceiver, they run the risk of leaving things too open and inviting chaos and confusion to the point that they procrastinate their lives away. And again, little typo for the professor. It's very obvious I'm a perceiver. They avoid meeting deadlines. They're often late to events and they delay decision making. And again, you may know people like this and wonder how they survive. They feel constrained by structure. They're very free-spirited. They prefer free-flowing environments and enjoy adapting to change. Again, they're energized by it. They tend to suspend judgment as long as possible because they really enjoy seeing all of that information come in and seeing what it leads to. But they might need a judger to finally get to that bottom line. They also tend to operate in shades of gray. They are living in ambiguity sometimes. And they like unexpected things in nearly all areas of life. So they are the person that would love the surprise party. And you would probably do fine throwing one for them. In the work world, perceivers and judgers can create a lot of conflicts with each other, especially when perceivers and judgers are under pressure together. As is always the case, it helps to be aware of other people's preferences, and knowing that people naturally behave differently can make irritating behavior not only easier to tolerate, but also easier to anticipate so you can prevent problems from coming up. One really funny example, if you were to look in your own life to try to determine if you're a judger or a perceiver, is to look at your work desk or maybe your study desk where you do school or work or kind of where you organize your life. When you look at your desk, you look at the condition of your desk. So typically, but not always, a judger's desk is fairly neat. It is well organized. There are spots for pencils, electronics, cords, and so forth. These items can usually be found very easily, especially at the beginning and the end of the day. They are always put in their proper places. If they have an in basket, it contains information to be reviewed, and the out basket for completed work. And they kind of like their piles of, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm finished with. They are actually pretty good at filing. Important information is usually filed away in a manner that's highly organized and allows for easy retrieval. It's not unusual to see on a judger's desk a list of things to do with a line draw through most of them, right? And so they get things done. They're busy people, and they kind of feel accomplished by having lines drawn through their list. They like electronics. They like anything that makes life more organized and easier. And so they're very interested in shortcuts and conveniences because it's going to maximize all their productivity. A perceiver's desk, on the other hand, is often, but not always, considerably less organized. It might contain several works in progress, projects that are started, halfway done, kind of suspended in midair, messages that need to be answered, lots of desk toys, malfunctioning pens, maybe the best indicator of all, a just for now pile or several piles of stuff that is not really organized at all. When put on the defensive, perceivers always claim that they can find anything they need in their office. They have a system to their piles. They just don't admit how much time it will take to do it, to find the thing that you're asking them for, because they have to sit and go through all their piles. So again, the condition of your desk, and you could extend this to your backpack, your closet, a purse, or your car, or a locker, reflects how your mind works, right? So, if you had to plan to travel and maybe travel for work, let's say you got a brochure, okay? So again, this is coming from the text. You got a brochure announcing an upcoming conference that is going to take place in a couple of months. A judger would be likely to throw the brochure away because they already went last year or they already have a prior commitment, fill out the application, write out a check to cover the fees, send it in, or just maybe give the brochure to somebody else who might be interested. The judger is going to make a decision to get the brochure off their desk. They need to be finite about it and move on. Okay, so they like kind of taking something that comes their way and getting resolved with it. A perceiver that maybe got a brochure about a conference in the same situation would behave very differently. First of all, 4 months into the future is a really long time from now for them. And they recognize that a lot could happen between now and then. And maybe something better will come along. And it's just really too soon to make a decision. So a perceiver realizes that they should file the brochure someplace. They're not really sure where, but they'll probably forget all about it. So they stick it in the infinite just for now stack of papers and folders already on the desk. And it kind of gets shuffled. Unless it's truly important, the brochure is probably going to get lost in the pile. It'll be probably discovered after the deadline for registration or even after the conference is over, and the perceiver doesn't make a decision. The brochure just hangs around her desk or his desk, taking up space until the time for a decision's passed. So again, these are kind of really funny stories, but everyone has a to-do list or a just for now pile. That's not unusual, but perceivers are likely to have all kinds of stuff in their think about it or just for now pile. And they probably have a lot of times and opportunities they miss because they procrastinated too long. But again, judgers can maybe pile so much work on that maybe they aren't really enjoying life as much as they could, or they miss out on things that would be beneficial to them when they change because they've been too wedded to the structure to allow for change or adaptation. So what's interesting is in the American population, about 60% of people are judgers and 40% are perceivers. And there really are no gender differences here. So that's the other thing that's really, really interesting about judging and perceiving. So as you think about which preference suits you, keep in mind that circumstances often force us to behave in ways that don't necessarily reflect our true selves, especially at work. If you have a demanding job and you have to get there on time, meet deadlines, and make lots of decisions, then you're going to maybe be forced to behave like a judger, even though you might be a perceiver. But if your work is very creative and spontaneous, it may drive you crazy because everyone around you is a perceiver and operating in these kind of fluid moments when you're trying to get things done and you feel like you're the only one working. And it gets kind of difficult, between your work life, your personal life, and it gets more intertwined, really determining what's the real you. So again, this is your chance to step back and see which preference would give you the most satisfaction. If you could behave any way you wished, where would you really be satisfied? Okay, that's the end of judge or perceiver. Again, this one is longer. I apologize for that, but this one is a tricky one to articulate. So now we have finally gone through all of the 4 personality dimensions. So this is your chance to regroup, right? Extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, or judging and perceiving. Again, no one way is right. It's which way fits you. So take some time after this lecture, let it soak in, and start really thinking about your own preferences and what makes you most satisfied. Thank you.